Thank you. What is this? This is not a cup of tea.
Spritzetto.
Spritzetto.
It's like an Aperol spritz in a can.
It's with New Zealand wine sparkling water. Where did you get this from?
Liquor store,
Oh.
some nostalgia. It does taste like an Aperol.
Oh.
It's good. Cheers. Well,
Yeah.
good.
There's no Italian waterfront, but yeah.
It's a Auckland lounge.
I think if I don't think about it as being in a can, it's actually tastes better than...
With a glass of beer. So, busy start of the year. It was a full 2025.
super full on. Last time I was here, I had little Paddy in my belly. Now he's 3 months old.
And sleeping soundly.
Wow.
We've been talking for a long time about we should give a bit of the background of how the AI Corner started, considering I think 3,500, 4,000 of the subscribers only joined in the last 4 months of the year. We tripled or quadrupled between July and December.
That's huge.
And we did quite a bit of AI on the couch in the middle of the year, I think it was, before Peter was born.
Midwinter.
There was good feedback. People enjoyed the conversation and getting to know how we think. So
Yep.
why don't we go back a step? What do you remember about how we kicked off?
Well, it's
AI on the
almost
couch?
a year ago, right? Like maybe in 2 weeks it would be a year since our first edition.
Yeah, mid-January, I want to say.
So much has changed in a year. This time last year, we had just started our South American adventure on our way home from London. What do I remember? We were trying to enjoy the holiday and having this amazing adventure, but also thinking about the next step in our lives, moving back home, getting jobs. We'd worked in tech for 8 or so years. When I was looking for a job back home, it was really hard to find news about tech or to understand the tech landscape. Specifically as it relates to AI, because that's where I wanted to go. And you had this idea to create a newsletter for a long time, didn't you?
Yeah, it's spent a lot of time tinkering outside of work for years, trying to build internet businesses pretty unsuccessfully, and had always thought there was a massive opportunity in newsletters because of what The Hustle and Morning Brew and Milk Road and the likes had built and then sold, and seeing the way that mainstream media has been disrupted and the creator economy continues to grow and independent media businesses have grown pretty successfully across Substack and people on LinkedIn or YouTube, whatever it might be. And so wanting to build a newsletter was always part of the game plan.
I'll be honest, when you did talk about that, I was thinking more along the lines of school newsletters. I didn't buy into the hype or understand why anyone would want to read a newsletter. It felt really old school.
It's a good point. What's really changed is if we think about how the internet has democratized access to information. Back in the day, you had a couple of TV channels, a couple of newspapers, and a couple of radio stations. Everyone got their information through just a few mediums. Internet took off, forums, blogs took off, everyone could have a voice online. And then social media took off, everyone could now really have a voice online. The barrier to entry for creating content and building a brand has never been easier, and it's just gotten easier ever since. And as different businesses and tech has proliferated across industries, the value of building an audience has meant that if you can control attention, you can get access to inboxes or first-party data, you can have people wanting to hear from you, you can monetize that audience. And that's never really been the game plan necessarily. That's been a byproduct of building the newsletter. The intent behind building the newsletter was around a framework that Greg Isenberg talks about he calls it the ACP framework.
And talk about who Greg Isenberg is for anyone that doesn't.
Yeah, good one. So Greg Isenberg is a creator out of he's actually from Canada, but he's based in the States. He is at the cutting edge of building media companies, leveraging the internet to make money, to build online businesses, to create distribution through online means. And of course, as AI has proliferated, he's looking at more and more. He talks about vibe coding and how can you use the internet to your advantage by finding the signal and the noise to create businesses.
Right.
He's got this framework called ACP, which is audience, community, product. Most people build a product and try to sell it. Building a product is the easiest part. Some people will dispute that, of course. Building is not easy, but going out and selling the product is the hardest part. Greg flips out and says, build an audience online through building an audience on Twitter or a newsletter or YouTube or whatever, your medium, Then once you have the attention of an audience, you then can create a community. You create almost like a special area or gated community where people get special access to you or your content or resources or tools that you can provide. How can you provide value to that community? You're able to identify problems that they face. And once you've identified the problems, then you build the product. And if you think about the way that works, you're going to have a higher chance of success if you understand problems before you build the product. Most people go the other way. They build a product and then try to pivot to what the audience tells them they want. So anyway, that's what's been the intent in my mind, is build the audience, then it'll get you to a product or a service that you can sell.
So you think about the most successful companies, like Nike, they built a product.
This is not the only framework. It's
Flipping it on its head.
It's a model that has only become available in the digital age at scale, I would say, which gives people a better chance of success. The challenge is that it takes a long time to build an audience, to then build your community, to find the problems, to build the product. So that timeline is potentially a lot longer. You can obviously build a product and go try sell it, and that's what most people will do, and a lot of people will have success doing that, and then a lot of people fail. That's why a high percentage of startups fail. They don't have product market fit.
Greg Isenberg, audience community product.
Building the newsletter was a way of finding our feet in the market. I was doing some consulting for friends and family on AI when we were traveling through South America, and thought, if I'm going to build this agency, we need to build a brand.
Why were you already there with AI? What had you been doing before that? You already had a special interest, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in AI and technology, and then I had read plenty about AI in my early 20s. It was complicated to get into it. But when GPT blew up in 2022, that made everything easier. The technology was democratized, tools were available to anyone. More and more, I was trying to figure out ways to start businesses using it. You might remember when we were in Melbourne, I started writing prompts and selling them, like how to use ChatGPT. Here's a prompt to create customer personas, or I created a couple of hundred prompts and made a little bit of money, but nothing to write home about. And more and more, was just fascinated with where everything was going, and thought prompt engineering was going to be the be-all, end-all for a skill. And then when I went to Passion Fruit in the UK, AI was built into the platform, which was great. So we were automatically working with people who saw where it was going and the opportunity. But even then, we were using Notebook LM heavily within the business a couple of years ago. Everyone had their own individual ChatGPT licenses, perhaps. Raf and I were using Claude heavily at that point, but there was always just a special interest of wanting to learn more, take advantage of the technology. And coming home, there were lots of people who were voices for AI in New Zealand and who do a really good job of that. But talking about all the stories in New Zealand of what was happening was missing, in terms of who were the thought leaders, who were the cutting edge of innovation, who were sharing stories about companies and what they were delivering when it comes to AI, who were the startups, who were the founders, all that stuff. A lot of people were looking at the US or global news and sharing that with New Zealand audiences to their own audience, which is needed, but really localizing that to the New Zealand market, and then creating that grassroots uplift and creating a platform for people to share their stories basically with the community.
I think for me, at the last couple of companies I worked at overseas, were using AI a lot, and both in their products but also internally, and I was quite fascinated by that. And just similar to what you said, I wanted to find out what similar companies were doing that in New Zealand, and that was the gap for me. There was nowhere to read that information, or no one online talking about it. These companies look like they probably use good technology.
As I say, there are a couple of reasons. One is start a business, one to scratch the itch of the newsletter. Both were trying to find either founders or jobs to work with coming home. All three of those presented an opportunity whereby we thought, there's a few newsletters that go around in New Zealand that are like a localized morning brew, and that was the angle we wanted, was like morning brew but for AI in New Zealand. And so we said, I think we dedicated an hour a day on the holiday to either finding a job or building something. That was our I think we carved that out each, and yours was photography. And I think even there was a point I was gonna interview local South American businessmen and go and try and understand how they build business models in that part of the world, which would have been fascinating. We came up with AI news in New Zealand for New Zealanders. Then we came home, both got jobs, and the AI narrative was really still taking off. I remember Christmas in New Zealand 2024, beginning of 2025, most people were still skeptical about AI. Even May, June 2025, most people were skeptical. Very different to the conversations that I've been having in New York and we've both been having in London for work, where AI was the hottest topic for at least 9 months, if not the entire of 2024. And so to come home and just to see it not being discussed in a positive light, for one, was really quite shocking, considering the potential opportunity. Two, to not see there are a few people driving it forward. The AI forum does really well, and a few leading voices in the ecosystem who people will be well familiar with now. They're all doing a great job, but trying to create more of a community-focused, cohesive environment where people could share more, and we would just be that elevation platform. And I remember that took a long time. Like, we would, on holiday for the 2.5 months we were in South America, we would stop in at a cafe, try find Wi-Fi. We'd buy a cup of coffee or a cup of tea every 2 hours so they get off our back so we could keep using the Wi-Fi. That would take 8 hours sometimes on a Sunday. We didn't have automation set up, doing it manually.
That was quite frustrating. That was driven by you. You knew this would turn into something, and I was skeptical.
Well, you don't know, but you have confidence and belief.
Yeah.
If you see where the tide is going, spend 5 minutes on Twitter compared to Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. They're all months behind Twitter. If you spend 5 minutes on Twitter, you can see where things are going quickly. Unfortunately, I think New Zealand's perspective in that space starts to hold us back a lot. We look at a lot of big tech coming out of the US, and we're either frustrated by people like Elon Musk, or we get despondent by what Facebook does, or we're wedded to Facebook and Instagram and stuff, but we don't spend any time on Twitter. And I'm not saying everything on those platforms is great, but you've got to open your mind to what's happening overseas, because it's years ahead of New Zealand. We need people who have been exposed to it or spend that extra time outside of hours living and breathing the stuff to translate it for the rest of the economy, to understand this is what's coming. It's not going to wait for New Zealand, and it's not up to New Zealand to decide whether it's right or wrong, or whether it's going to happen or not going to happen. It's going to happen. So the decision gets made for us as a country unless we decide to embrace these technologies. I think that's been the biggest eye-opener for me, is that lack of willingness to listen and explore and be open to change that's happening overseas at a far faster rate than anything that we're exposed to or in the mainstream media in New Zealand. Yeah, so what do? We pumped out a newsletter on a weekly basis. I remember we created the newsletter, and we would put out the newsletter on a Monday, say, hey, we've published this newsletter. Tuesday we'd go, hey, here are all the events in New Zealand for the week. Wednesday we'd say, hey, here are all the open jobs at the moment. And I remember back then, the number of events on a weekly basis in New Zealand was anywhere from 6 to 15 AI events. And then the number of AI jobs, we were sifting through jobs posted for the past 7 days on LinkedIn, Seek, and Trade Me with AI or machine learning as keywords. I think we would get 6 on a good week, not 60 or 70, I think it was like 20.
Yeah, this was hard because there were a lot of automated, there was companies were advertising 20 of the same role. I can't remember the names of them now.
They're programmatic. Yeah, I know the ones you're talking about. They had people who were basically reviewing content, and that's the human training element.
I started to sift them out and really just focus on the New Zealand-based companies, or the companies that were quite obviously trying to get a foothold in New Zealand. That did go up significantly over the year, didn't it?
And then you were doing a section on women and AI in New Zealand, or DEI and AI, or something like that.
There was that. That's something I'd love to continue into 2026. But I remember the first 100 subscribers, we were combing through friends and family, and it was exciting. It was such a buzz when we'd get 1 or 2 each week. And then exponentially.
The fascinating part was friends. We went from, I don't know, I think we got 100 in the first week, and then 120, 150. We were going up 30 to 50 a week on a good week. It was grim for a while. And then we saw a real uplift when we ramped up LinkedIn content. I moved away from just New Zealand news, even though that was a hygiene layer. I'd try and update every other day about New Zealand. But it became pretty clear that the same stories were beginning to repeat.
Yeah.
The government's not doing enough. Auckland University's got some research, or I think the legal firms were showing up a lot in Microsoft research in the early days, or Deloitte would come out with an article. Like it was the same thing, or there would always be a community-based solution published. There might be camera technology out there that's able to identify what's a pest and what's not a pest, and that would change the way that the trap executes, which I thought that was pretty neat. Yeah. There was a lot of those same pillars coming through on repeat for the first 6 months, which I don't know if anyone else saw that. We definitely started to see it. And we were also covering the Australian news, and that was eye-opening because you had the Australian AI news, which was a lot more research coming out of universities, like breakthroughs when it came to bio and medical. There were big partnerships being formed either with universities in Australia and overseas companies, or companies in Australia and overseas universities. That was another massive eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
And then we had more noise from the Australian government, and then of course just more funding.
A lot more funding.
For every cap raise that was made in New Zealand on a monthly basis for a startup in AI, there might be 5 to 7 in Australia. So that was interesting to compare the two markets and where they were trending. Of course, scale and dollars are bigger over there. We saw real growth when we pivoted from just news to what's happening with big tech and global AI, and localizing that. Hey, here are some workflows, here are some demos, here's some examples, here's some, even translating like this is what's happening overseas with perspectives about AI, yet New Zealand is still fearful, or we are mistrusting or distrusting, trying to translate, hey, we are somewhat starting to fall behind of showing up in the numbers. You compare that to the data, which overseas is different.
When did you decide to do your first podcast? I can't quite remember. That was on May, June.
I was getting bored of written content because it felt a bit one trick. So I started to do some videos on LinkedIn, but didn't quite have the confidence for that yet, or the capability to edit them in a decent way. Had some friends and ex-colleagues who were pretty into AI, and they'd either quit their day jobs to go and chase this, or had joined, rebuilt their entire careers, moving from non-AI companies to AI4 companies, picked up the phone, and they were I was very grateful. They said, yeah, I'd jump on, do an interview. I'd never run a podcast interview before. I'd done some panels in the past, but...
That's cool. You had, who was the first?
Dan Fowley.
Dan Fowley, yes.
Dan Fowley, Joe Sutherland might have been number 2. Matt Ensel, JD from AutoHive, JD Trusk, he was on there as well. Awesome. Yeah, I can't remember exactly who was the first 5, but those few were right up there. And
I remember those days while trying to get into the kitchen, locked out of most of the house in that little...
Go for a run or the gym for an hour. Things have changed, right? I was very robotic and scripted in my approach. But that was awesome, not only to meet more people in the ecosystem, to give them a voice, because there are some amazing people building, learning, innovating in the space who either don't have a platform because that's not their bag, they're not interested in having a huge brand online, which is that's fine, they'd rather build. But I do believe that their story should still be told, because they're doing amazing things and what they are building should be recognized from other people. And then there are others who had their own business, and this was a great way for them to give us a hand with some of the reach and the brand credibility they have, and vice versa. We did 40 interviews in 6 months, really. We covered at least 80% of prominent people in AI in New Zealand, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And they've been great in terms of reciprocating, amplification of content, and being supporters and all the rest of it. And so that's been a great way to build brand and credibility. I think we're going to do less of the interview process this year because just don't have the time with job, Patty, and trying to grow this.
Yeah.
I also think I did find near the end of the year, and this is not in any one person, but just across the board, the conversation starts to get a bit same.
And also you knew that you were having a son, or a baby.
Yeah, I think getting that diverse perspective is important as the space starts to mature. We're still in the very early stages, but the point of views start to coerce around the same types of topics. So I think we need to be more strategic on what topics we're talking about this year. The podcast gives you a lot of short form content. We could put that on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok Shorts and all the rest of it. We've got YouTube and Spotify channels, which are still very embryonic, very slow moving. They grow slower than LinkedIn and Instagram. I think we grew to a decent followership for very little effort on Instagram, and there's more we could be doing there. And then what else do we do? We had the podcast, newsletter kept going, LinkedIn really ramped up. Then we decided to jump into courses and training.
That was in the last few months.
We did a bunch of private stuff, which went really well. Went public with the course, which was, again, an epic experience. Had a great cohort, plenty of learnings for me, plenty of learnings for the group. Yeah. And what I've more and more come to realize through the work I'm doing at Alexa, through my day job and at the AI Corner, is the different speeds that people are at. The Dunning-Kruger effect is prevalent in AI, where someone masters ChatGPT, the free version, and they believe they've nailed AI or Copilot. Then you go, you're on Copilot chat, you're not even using 365, or you haven't even got into Foundry yet within the Azure environment with Microsoft, or you're still on GPT, you haven't even got to Claude, if you're still in Claude, but haven't actually got to Claude Code yet. Once you start to move through that funnel, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you get to the point of being very confident, then you head into the valley where you go, I actually know nothing. Every day you get humbled by what other people are doing or the limitations you come up against, and then every time you crack open the next layer of capability and you start to really unlock what you can do, it can be really mind-blowing. But helping people realize that they're potentially only on the first, the second or third rung of the ladder, there's still a number of other rungs to go to climb up to.
Yeah.
And that might just be an AI fundamentals. We're not even talking about vibe coding yet, or agent building, or automations, or transformation change. There's all these different vectors. And so there's still a lot of road to run for us as a newsletter and as a education community knowledge channel.
Yeah.
But just a huge journey for everybody in the market, in New Zealand especially, to go on to really understand how to harness the technology.
How do you manage your time to do it all?
Poorly. With any type of heavy duty effort you need to put into something like a project, you've got to give up other stuff. So if you think about the four burners of your life, you've got work, family, social, and health. Family, you can't turn that off. That has to always be on at least a medium. I think if you're going below a medium and you've got either a partner or a family, kids, I think you're doing your family a disservice there. So you've got to keep that one on medium to high at a minimum. Work pays the bills. That's always got to be there. So social, naturally, is probably the first thing that comes off if that's something that's not as important to you when you're focusing on something important to your career or you as a person. Health has come down for sure. Definitely not running, exercising much. Things have come off the priority list, which is fine. I haven't played golf for a year. But at the same time, you've got to find the time, and having Paddy is reinforced that, putting together our 2026 plan. I came away with 4 priorities, and that's the least amount of priorities I've ever come up with for a year. Usually it's double figures at least. So that in itself is illustrative of where the prioritization has to happen. You've got to set up systems, for one. Like, I still write a good chunk of the content. Of course, AI is helping to streamline and accelerate that process, but I'm not confident or not comfortable just putting out AI generated slot because it doesn't read well, and if I can see it, the reader can see it. I think the biggest accelerant has been automation for filtering information. How does stuff I find on Twitter, Reddit, or LinkedIn come into my system, filtered, prioritized, and the plan gets thought out for me? Building more and more of the automations in the back end, and that started off with GPTs. That quickly progressed to Claude pretty early on last year, and since August it's been Claude Code, basically accelerating that process even further. And I'd say that has been a tipping point for me. I was putting a lot of effort into the output. Now with Claude Code, the effort to get the same output is completely collapsed. Good systems is the other piece. And of course, as Kiwis, we're not great at putting ourselves out there, and I have a lot to thank previous employers, particularly Passion Fruit, for prioritizing building brand and being out there on LinkedIn and creating profile. You have to get over that hump of putting yourself out there, of course, as someone from New Zealand. But once you get over that hump, you build confidence. And I suppose just going through the year, as we got more proficient and more comfortable and start to figure out our lane and where this is going and what we could do in our voice in the market, coupled with the systems and down weighting some of the other parts of our lives, it's just been able to incrementally grow. And I'm also lucky that my day job and the AI Corner reinforce each other. They're both in a space so I'm often learning in the daytime for work, which feeds an idea for content which I can write at night or first thing in the morning. So I'm not starting with a cold start every morning or every evening these days. How about you? We were confident Paddy would come along and you would be able to pick up the laptop for 2 to 4 hours a day and just chip away and build an Instagram channel, but that has proved harder than expected.
Like, I'm not a social media whiz. It's not my wheelhouse. I was enjoying building up a little Instagram following and doing what I can on YouTube and TikTok. trying to understand them a little bit better. And yes, as you say, we both thought that once Paddy came along, I'd be at home all day, every day with him. I'd surely have some time to open the laptop, but that has proven not to be the case. And anyone who's a parent listening to this will resonate, I'm sure. Days are just so busy with him. And newborn phase is crazy and wild. It definitely feels like we're building a bit of a routine now. Nap times, more structured, although changing a bit. And so I would really like to become more involved again. I think just do a couple of hours here and there where I can each week. My mat leave is still happening, but it'd be cool to use my brain a bit more in a different way. Yes, we're going to start building up the Instagram and the YouTube and the TikTok content again, not just with your podcast snippets, but with other videos that you make as well, which would be cool. And AI on the couch, we want to do a lot more of these videos as well.
I would say that for all the positive and supportive feedback we get about the newsletter, about content, about all that stuff that makes up the AI corner, without a doubt, the most excited people have been when they've shared feedback has been about AI on the couch.
That's so cool.
And we only, 6 or 7 episodes. Like we recorded many more but didn't put them out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But clearly there's I think it's a really solid balance between someone who enjoys spending their waking minutes thinking about this.
Yeah.
And then it keeps me intellectually honest to communicate and translate it to you. And then to have someone like yourself who is very keenly interested, may not have the time or the expertise to focus on developing, learning, keeping up to date, all the rest of it, but then creating that space for you to educate the listener by virtue of your questions and helping to pull me back to say, Mike, that makes no sense, don't understand what you're saying there. I think as a format, it'll really resonate with a large portion of the New Zealand community, really. Yeah,
that are trying to make sense of all of this. I'd say I represent the average layperson in New Zealand in business who gets it and is eager to understand, but doesn't have the capacity to deep dive. I want to bring use cases from my life and ask dumb questions so that other people don't need to, so they can just watch and learn.
It's very easy to be spoon-fed what mainstream media gives you, what Microsoft sells you or Google sells you because that's your provider. You read an article every other day about AI in the news and it's about job loss or the bubble or something that One or Spark are doing and that's all relevant and valid.
Yeah.
And then you get the Microsoft Copilot access and maybe some light training and you might see the odd LinkedIn post, but it's all very surface level. And then it's just you become the average of the workforce, and I think we can all appreciate now that maintaining a status quo with how we've operated pre-AI is not going to cut it during this AI transformation boom. The productivity, efficiency gains and outcomes experienced by businesses and teams that are really doubling down on this, despite what MIT study says that 95% of pilots fail. It's all mainly BS and also a poor sample size, but those that really dedicate time to this and learn and adopt see transformational results. So the more we can translate that via this format, through the newsletter, through Instagram, through YouTube videos, whatever, the real intent this year is to take people on more of a journey, to move from just being a news source for New Zealand to translating what's happening overseas, showing people more application, business specific, of course, but then there's obviously our own personal interests that we'll double down on, of course, as well. But then giving people the tools to do that, not just showing, but saying, here are the tools that you can use. You can DIY it, but we'll give you the rundown, a playbook, or template on how to implement it. I think that's a massive opportunity in the market that isn't being covered in a space we can play in pretty well.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Awesome.
Nice to chat.
You too. See you all again soon.